Audio check. Check. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ritesh, and welcome to this final webinar in the series of popular music theory. And yeah, it seems just like yesterday since I started these webinars, but today is actually the 18th webinar. This is about 27 hours of content on popular music theory that we have put together for you. I hope this has been extremely beneficial for all of you, and you have enjoyed attending these webinars. And I know that a lot of you actually watch these webinars after the webinar is done because some of you are busy with schools and other commitments. But as long as you're learning from these things and enjoying these things, that's serving our purpose. Makes it worth all the effort that we have been putting in. My name is Ritesh. I'm the country manager and director for Rockschool, and the content that we have been putting up here is actually been compiled right here in India by our own team, and it's primarily based on my 20 plus years of teaching experience and the guidebooks of Rockschool, which have been extremely helpful. In fact, I have learned a couple of new things putting these webinars together. If you're enjoying the content and you're liking what you get here, please do hit the like and subscribe to our channel, because we have very soon our High Achievers concert coming up, virtual concert obviously in these times of COVID, and that will be live streamed on YouTube. There is no, it's going to be a public performance. There is no registration for it. So please, just as long as you're subscribed and the bell is clicked upon, you will get the notification for it. If you have any doubts, you can please post it on the site. Yeah, thank you. You can just post it on the site if you have any doubts, but please limit your doubts to the scope of grade 8 that we're discussing today and not to the previous grades. There is a lot more knowledge out there beyond grade 8 as well. And if you have doubts about that and you would like to discuss with me, feel free to just drop me a mail and we can have a live session some point over Zoom or something. And I'll be happy to discuss further concepts with you. Finally, people have been asking us, can we get a participation certificate for these webinars? And the answer is yes. And what we're doing is we are putting together 3 levels of the certification for this, because obviously the theory that I've covered from right from grade W to grade 8 is a very vast scope, and not everybody is possibly going to cover all of this theory or learn from all of this theory. So what we are doing is we are putting up some quizzes that if you score, it's like a mini test. If you say, it's purely objective type, where you will see a question and there'll be a couple of answers. You have to just pick the correct answer. If you score 70% or above, if you get 70% of the answers correct in that, we will be issuing you an e-certificate for participation in this program, which you can very well print and put up in your offices if you like, or you can just keep it for your record if you like. So this participation certificate will be at 3 levels. Level 1 is going to be up to grade 3. So there will be questions covering from grade W to grade 3 in that quiz. The level 2 certificate is going to be for grade 4 and 5. So there will be questions covering these 2 grades. And the level 3 certificate of participation will be covering from grade 6 to 8. I'm sorry, ideally if you had just attended this if it had been a workshop and you had attended it physically, we would have given you the participation certificates. But in this case, we need to make sure that you have actually gone through the content and have made use of the knowledge covered here. And this is the only way we can do that. So hence there is a quiz that you will need to go through and score about 70% and above to get this certificate from us. So I hope that is helpful. You will be getting details of how you can take this quiz at any of the 3 levels on your email. So this will be going out to only the people who have registered for these webinars using our link earlier. So there are about close to 300 people who have registered and have been attending these webinars. So we will be sharing these links on the email with you. So without further delay, let's jump into the grade 8. Today is the part 2 of grade 8. And here we will be covering the popular music theory of the popular music harmony and the band analysis. The other 2 sections, which was the the music notation part of it and the band knowledge part, has already been covered in the part 1. I believe there is some copyright issue with that one because I use a very small clipping of Purple Rain in that. So I need to edit that out, and I will do that hopefully today. So you will be able to gain access to that webinar again. So sorry for the trouble that you have faced about the copyright issue. I got an email from someone just this morning about it. So I will fix that issue today itself. So let's get going with the grade 8 theory webinar. Today we are going to be discussing a lot of interesting topics, especially with the scales and advanced modes and application of those modes. So last webinar in grade 7 part 2, I covered all the modes and what are the common progressions in those modes and what kind of chords you can use over those modes and stuff like that. Today we are going to do some more advanced scales and chords, right? So let's get going. First thing is, add accidentals required to put the following musical passage into the scale of F melodic minor. Now when we talk about the melodic minor in contemporary harmony, we don't have a different version ascending and descending. We basically use the version. So I will be showing you demos on the piano every now and then. So let me just show you the people who are coming from the classical genre, like myself actually, they would be quite used to playing the melodic minor in two different ways. So going up will look like, say I'll take the C melodic minor, and this is what the C melodic minor kind of look like. But that is not how it works with the contemporary harmony. When we say melodic minor, we don't mix it up with the natural minor. It's just purely this. So we don't have a different version of the melodic minor coming down. So if we go back to the question here, add the accidentals required for the F melodic minor. F melodic minor is coming from the A flat major, which has 4 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat and D flat. The 6th and the 7th note of the F minor scale, the melodic minor scale, would ideally be, natural minor scale would be D flat and E flat. Because we are dealing with the melodic minor, we will be using the D natural and the E natural. So the only two notes that will be affected by the accidentals that we will put is the A and the B, and they both will be flats. So that is the correct answer for this particular thing. I put these two flats here, and these two notes appear again. This note B appears again in the same bar, so this is also a B flat. The E and the D will be naturals because we are using the melodic minor form. And the second bar does not have B or an A, so we will not need any further accidentals. Now when we come to the, now this is where it gets a little tricky, because we have a G sharp melodic minor. Now G sharp melodic minor is actually coming from the B major, which has 5 sharps, and the 5 sharps actually include the 7th note of the scale. So F is already a sharp. So to make it a melodic minor, the E note, which is the 6th note, will also need to be raised by putting a sharp, and the F, which is already a sharp, will need a double sharp to raise it. We cannot call it a G for reasons that we have discussed in the earlier grades. All the note names need to be present, and it has to be some kind of an F to be a 7th interval from the root. So this is the correct answer for that. The F will be the double sharp, and E will be a sharp. E will be a sharp again. All the other sharps from the B major scale are already there. Now they have exactly given the same passage again, and this time they have only asked for the G sharp harmonic minor, not the melodic minor, in which case the E will be a natural and F will continue to be the double sharp, and that is the correct answer for that. E is a natural and F is now a double sharp. If you have any answers, please do put it in the comments, and I'm keeping an eye on that. Going forward, identify the scale used in the musical passage below. Write your answers on the dotted line below the staff. So the first scale here is D flat, E flat, F, G, A, B, C, right? So the C note is not used, but what's happening here is, this is basically, if you look at the intervals between all of these notes, they're all making a tone. So this is a scale called the whole tone scale. I'm going to discuss the scale in detail in a bit. So this is called the whole tone scale, and they have not asked you to identify the tonic, but you could have written it's a D flat whole tone scale. But this is something called the symmetric scale, and this is the reason why I have not put the tonic here, and I'm going to discuss this in detail. Identify the scale used in the musical passage below. Write your answers on the dotted line, fair enough. Now this is on the bass clef, this is starting on the E flat, and I see only E flat and B flat notes used. A note is not used, and this is basically a pentatonic, and this is going to be an E flat major pentatonic. I can see the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th and the 6th. So this is E flat major pentatonic scale. Identify the scale. As you can see, the numbers of these examples 1, 3 and 6. So I have not answered all the examples in the book. it is advisable that you do it yourself. If you have any doubts, you may please ask me about these things. Identify the scale used in the musical passage below, and this is starting on E again, but this time it's E natural, and I can see this chromatic movement here. This is a B natural, B flat, and back to B natural. So that typically happens in a blues scale, and if you analyze this in detail yourself, this is going to be an E minor blues, or simply E blues scale. Minor blues is called the blues. The major blues is also known as the country scale, right? So this is just E blues scale, and when we write blues only without mentioning major or minor, it is assumed that it is a minor blues. So now this is where I discuss all the interesting scales and advanced scales and key signatures. So first thing is symmetric scales. So what are symmetric scales and what are non-symmetric scales? In a nutshell, all the diatonic scales which have a tonal center, right, are called the symmetric scales. For example, if I play you a C major scale, the intervals between the notes of C major are not the same. This is a tone, another tone, a semitone. So tone and semitone are different intervals. So it's a mix of different intervals. In this case, what happens is one note gains more importance than the others, and C is the most important note in this particular scale because that is the tonal center. If I play the scale and stop on the 7th note, it sounds incomplete because C needs to be played. That's the home key or the tonic. In symmetric scale, what happens is that the intervals between the notes are exactly the same. So what are the possibilities? When we are talking about scales, we are only dealing with tones and semitones typically. The only exception being the harmonic minor width is an augmented second between the 6th and the 7th note. So we are primarily only dealing with tones and semitones. So for it to be a symmetric scale, that means all the notes having the same interval between them. Let's start with the smallest gap, that is a semitone. So if we take a starting note and I just build a scale using all the semitones possible, this is called the chromatic scale, and this all the notes have a semitone between them. So there is no one note that is more important than the other. And this is a typical mistake that the students make. They start playing this chromatic scale on a particular note and they overshoot that note and they turn back around and nothing sounds wrong. That's because of this thing, this character of the symmetric scales, that all the notes are equal in this. So the first scale to do that is the chromatic scale. Now if we increase that semitone to a tone, what happens? C, we take a tone, D, another tone, E, another tone, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and back to C. So in this particular case, this is a whole tone scale. Semitones or the chromatic scale had 12 notes, and if you double the gap of the interval that we use in the chromatic, what we get is half the number of notes, which is 6 notes. So this is your whole tone scale. So that is your whole tone scale, and this is also symmetric scale. That means no one note is more important than the other. So it doesn't matter if you play till E and come back, or if you stop on a different note, nothing sounds incomplete because all the notes are equal. The moment we increase this gap of a tone by a semitone, we are no longer dealing with scales. It becomes an arpeggio or a chord. So if I take minor thirds for that example, I get a diminished 7th chord. So that's no longer a scale. So this is the only two symmetric scales possible in a way, and these are also known as the non-diatonic scale. The diatonic, when there's a tonality to a scale where one note is more important than the others, and non-diatonic are when all the notes are equal and there is no one note which is more important than the others. Also you can call them atonal. They don't have a tonal center, so they are called the atonal scales. Going forward, we have symmetric chords as well, and I just played that for you, and I would like to briefly talk about this one because it's a very important chord. This is called a diminished 7th chord. So that is slightly different than the minor 7th flat 5 chord that we have done. So let's just look at the diatonic chords in the key of C major. Sorry, I'll be turning aside to show you all this. So the diatonic chords, the 7th chord found in the key of C major is this. This is the B, that's a B diminished chord, and we have the A above it, which is the Yeah, that is called the minor 7th flat 5. Why? This is the minor 7th, which is the flat 7th note, and this is same minor 7 with the flattened 5th. Now this is not a diminished chord because look at the intervals. B to D is a minor 3rd, D to F is a minor 3rd, but F to A is a major 3rd. So this is not a symmetric chord. The moment I drop this note by a semitone, we get all minor 3rds. Minor 3rd, minor 3rd, minor 3rd, and if I go to the next note, I'm again a minor 3rd apart. So this is a symmetric chord. There are only 3 of these chords in the entire keyboard. Let me play you these 3 chords. This is the B diminished 7th. This is the C diminished 7th. This is the C sharp diminished 7th. The moment we go to the next chord, D diminished 7th, we are back to the same chord as the B diminished 7th. It's an inversion of it. So the B diminished 7th, D diminished 7, F diminished 7, and the A flat or the G sharp diminished 7, they will all have exactly the same notes. So similarly, C diminished, D sharp diminished, F sharp diminished, or the A diminished, they will all have the same notes exactly. So now, why is this chord so important and how is it used is a more important theory to look at. If I compare this chord with a dominant 7th chord, let's see what happens. So dominant 7th is, this is a dominant 7th. Let's look at the intervals. Major 3rd, minor 3rd, minor 3rd. So it has a diminished triad in it. And the 3rd and the 7th degree of a dominant 7th form the tritone, which creates all the tension that wants to resolve to the tonic, right? So C7 going to the F. The key notes are these 2 notes, the 3rd and the 7th of the dominant 7th, that fall and rise by a semitone to get to the resolution of it. So that's a dominant 7th. If I raise the dominant 7th, the root note of the dominant 7th by a semitone, what do I get? I have a diminished 7th. Interestingly, so if you look at the other way around, if I drop one semitone from this diminished 7th by a semitone, I get a dominant 7, right? But because it is a symmetric chord, if I drop a semitone of any of these things, okay, if I drop a semitone from any of these things, any of these 4 notes, I get a diminished 7th in some key, some different key. For example, from the C sharp diminished 7th, if I drop the root, I get a C7, right? That's a dominant 7th in the key of F, right? If I drop the second note of this by a semitone, I get the E flat 7, which is a dominant 7th in the key of A flat. So no matter where you are, by switching to the diminished 7th chord, you will basically be able to go to, you have a choice of going to 4 different keys by doing that. So I hope that concept is clear. There's another symmetric chord which is the augmented chord. Let me just show you that as well. So we have a C augmented, C, E and a G sharp. So this is a major 3rd and a major 3rd. But if you consider these 2 notes, they have the same number of semitones. That means this is also a major 3rd. So if I play a C augmented, E augmented, A flat augmented, it is going to be the same thing. And 2 augmented chords will give you the whole tone scale, and 2 diminished 7th chords will give you something called the whole tone half tone scale or the diminished scale. So that is going to be the next topic that we will discuss. Next we have is the altered scale. Now what is the altered scale? Let me just adjust the temperature of the AC. Getting a little warm here. So next is the altered scale, and how the altered scale works is it is basically a scale using the color tones of a dominant 7th chord. Now this scale particularly uses a different arrangement of the notes, and they are named differently. So let me just show you what this altered scale is. Actually I played this scale in the last when I was explaining modes as well, especially the Locrian mode. This is also known as the super Locrian scale. So this is your scale, right? So this is basically the Locrian, but it has, instead of the 4th, it has a 3rd in it, right? it has the third, so we are able to play it over a dominant 7th chord. That is your altered scale. So how that works is, this is also a mode of a minor, right? So which minor would that be? Is melodic minor scale. Let me just have a think of it. This is D flat minor. So D flat minor scale is this. D flat minor comes from the E major, or a C sharp minor comes from the E major, and this is what the natural minor scale is. Melodic minor is this, right? If you know the C sharp melodic minor, that is exactly the scale. If I play the same scale starting on the C, I get this. So this is the 7th mode of the melodic minor as well. Now, why this is special is because if I look at the formula, I would ideally call it the flat 2nd, sharp 2nd, 3rd, flat 5th, sharp 5th, flat 7th, and the tonic, right? So this is what I would typically call it, but this is not numbered like that. And this is a peculiar scale because it's called the flat 9 and a sharp 9, 3rd, flat 5, sharp 5. They could have called the flat 5, flat 6, but they don't do that. Flat 5, sharp 5, flat 7, and the root. The reason why they do that is because it kind of gives you what kind of altered notes in the chord can you use over it. So that brings us to the topic of altered chords, what they are. And altered chord is nothing but a dominant 7th chord with added flat 9 or a sharp 9 or a flat 5, flat 9 or sharp 5, sharp 9, right? Or a sharp 5, flat 9. All of these chords are commonly used. Flat 5, flat 9 is not so common, but this can be called the augmented 7 sharp 9 as well. This can also be named the dominant 7 sharp 5 sharp 9. So all of these variations to these chords are using the notes of the whole tone scale, not the whole tone scale, sorry, the super Locrian scale, also the 7th mode of the melodic minor. So this is the altered chord and the altered scale. This is commonly used obviously in jazz. It's not so common in other genres of music, but in jazz this is a very important scale actually. This one and the Lydian dominant, which we will discuss in a bit. Going forward, we have the diminished scale, and this is also known as the half whole or a whole half tone scale. How that works is, it's constructed entirely of whole tones and half tones. I hope the volume is fine. I see a message from Jude saying that the volume is not loud enough. I can increase it, just give me a second, 1 second. Actually, I won't be able to adjust that right now. I hope the volume is okay. All right, so whole tone, half tone. Let me just show you how this kind of works. So if we take any note, let's start from C. I'll take a whole tone and a half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So this is one way of constructing a diminished scale. The other is the other way around. We start with a half step, then a whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. Now if you notice, the scale has 8 notes and the 9th note is the starting note again, and which is a very good thing for a jazz pianist, because typically they are dealing with the time signature of 4/4 and they ideally need 8 notes to complete 8 note completes one complete bar of music for them. So even when they play the modes or the scales for that matter, they practiced 9 note scales, which are like, so they have the 8 notes and the beats are completed. They're not left with the last note sounding longer than the first note and things like that. So this is one way of constructing the diminished scale. The other interesting way of constructing this diminished scale, and I told you earlier that there are only 3 of these scales on the entire keyboard. So if I look at the C diminished 7th chord and I club it with the C sharp diminished 7th chord, these two chords, notes of these two chords put together will give me a diminished scale starting on the C with the half step, whole step. So this is the half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, right? So that's my diminished scale, which is constructed out of these two chords, C and the C sharp. If I construct the same scale out of C and the B, or C and the D, which is the same thing, I will get the other version of it, the whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, right? So this is the second version of it. The third version is actually going to be from the B and the C sharp. So I constructed B and the C and C sharp, then C and the B. Now the B and the C sharp is the third scale that you can construct. So B diminished and the C sharp diminished. So it will start with a tone and a semitone. So it doesn't have the C note at all in it. So that is going to be the third scale. Now if you start constructing this scale from any other note, you will actually end up using the notes of one of these three scales which I have just discussed with you. So this is how you, these are the two ways you can construct the diminished scale or the whole tone half tone scale or the half tone whole tone scale as well. Finally, we have the modal key signatures, and there are two ways where we can use the key signatures. One obviously is the parent scale. So if we are in the D Dorian mode, we will use the key signature of the C major. In this case, you're always considering the parent key, right? So suppose we are in a D flat Dorian or a C sharp Dorian, we are looking at a B major scale, right? So it can get a little tedious when you see that the music is actually moving around the C note and the key signature is that of B major. So it can be a little confusing sometimes. So as we discussed in the grade 7, that there are two categories of the modes. Either they are closer to the major scale or they are closer to the minor scale. Like the Dorian, the Aeolian, the Phrygian, they are closer to the minor scales, Locrian as well. And the Lydian and the Mixolydian, they are closer to the major scales. So the other way of tackling this key signature is that you choose the key signature of the closest parallel major or minor depending on the mode that you are in. For example, if you are in the mode of D minor, D Dorian, you can use the key signature of D minor. That gives you that the tonic is D, that the whatever scales we are using. So whatever scale that you're using, you know that the tonic or the tonal center is D note. So that is going to be your tonal center, right? So that is the benefit of using the closest parallel or major or minor scale. So if you are in, say, E Lydian mode, so you have to raise the fourth note, I would use the key signature of E major and not that of B major, and that will actually simplify my life because I need to use only one accidental on the fourth note, which is A, and I will know that this is the E major but the A is sharp, so we are in a Lydian mode. So that's another, I think, a very practical way of using the key signatures when you're writing in modal music, especially if you're going to that mode briefly, which is a very common thing in jazz. When we discuss the band analysis part, you will see this. Now the other thing that I really wanted to show you, and this is not discussed in detail in the book, but at the end of the guidebook, there's one page which has some extra knowledge, some extra skills which are not covered in the scope of the grade 8, but they exist, and we encourage you to go and study that as well. So these are the modes of the melodic minor. So we had the modes of the major, which was the Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, and the Ionian, right? So all of these modes also exist for the minors, but they are not exactly named the same way because of the tonality of the scale that they end up with. For example, the melodic minor obviously is this, and this is a formula from the major scale. If I take a major scale and I raise the, lower the third note, I basically get the melodic minor scale. Now the second mode is going to be the Dorian, and you need to be going looking at the parent scale considering the melodic minor. So the Dorian is suppose in the key of C. Let me just show you. So suppose we are looking at the modes of the natural minor. This is your natural minor scale. Seventh note is a B flat, right? So if I have to construct the C Dorian from the natural minor, I would be looking at the scale of B flat from C to C. So B flat minor is this, right? So B flat minor comes from the D flat major, and the C is the second note of that, and I will be basically playing the B flat minor. Second note of the natural minor will be coming from the B flat scale, not from B natural. But when we are talking about the C melodic minor, 7th note is a B, right? So we will be constructing it from the B. So we need to just keep a track of what scale that we are in and how those notes will work. So this is the reason why the second note is a flat here, third is a flat, and the 7th is a flat. So let me just show you this. If I construct the C Dorian flat 9 scale, which is the second mode of the melodic minor, it will be basically the B, sorry, C in a minor, the C is the second. So in the melodic minor, the second is a major second, so it will be coming from the B flat scale. So it will be the B flat melodic minor from C to C. That is your Dorian. When we go to the Lydian augmented, that's going to have the sharp 4 and the sharp 5. Now this is where it changes, because we are in melodic minor, we are looking at the A minor, not the A flat minor. I'll show you this. So if you look at the A minor scale, it has the C note in it as a third, right? So A flat minor would have not had the C note in it. So it will be basically A melodic minor from C to C. That is the Lydian augmented. If you could give few examples of songs, retro, Indian, Bollywood, help me understand modes. Sorry Jude, I'm not a specialist at the Bollywood music and I will not be able to think of examples of that straight away. This is primarily used in what do you call this, in jazz. And glad that you asked that question though, because how do you use this mode? And it's not about the songs being constructed in this particular mode, but if you look at the Dorian flat 9, it is called the flat 9 because it's hinting at what chord extension can use this mode. For example, if I have, so you can see the flat 7 is there, the flat third is there. So if I have a minor 7 flat 9 chord, it will be C, E flat, G, A flat and a D flat, right? Over this scale and this chord, I will use a scale. That will work very well with that. So it is how you connect and what scale choices you make over a particular chord, and that's where these things are helpful, which is why this is called the Mixolydian flat 13. So you know that if you're using Mixolydian is basically a dominant mode. If you're using a dominant 7 chord with a flat 13 extension, you are likely to use the Mixolydian flat 13 scale, or you can use the super Locrian, or you can use the Lydian dominant. So Lydian dominant is right here, and that is the 4th mode of a melodic minor. And this one has the sharp 4th and the flat 7th. So it's basically a dominant 7th Mixolydian scale with the Lydian over it. Now technically Dorian, this should have been called the Phrygian, but because the 4 is a sharp and that's the quality of a Lydian, we are not calling it Phrygian, we are calling it the Lydian. Lydian augmented is the 3rd mode, Lydian dominant is the 4th mode, right? Then the Mixolydian flat 13 is that. And Locrian natural 9. So that means if you're using a 9 note over a minor 7 chord, minor 7 flat 5 with a natural 9, this is the scale that you can use, which is also known as the half diminished. And finally we have the altered scale that we have discussed in detail earlier. But look at the name they have given to it. It's also known as the diminished whole tone scale. And the reason for that is, if I just go back to the super Locrian, the 4 notes, first 4 notes or the first tetrachord of this scale is using a half step, whole step, half step, and this is how we construct the diminished scale. So it starts as a diminished scale, but the next 4 notes are tone, 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 tone. So that's a whole tone scale. So it's a diminished, it starts as a diminished and ends as a whole tone. So for that reason, it is also known as the diminished whole tone scale. That's quite a heavy duty topic. So let's move on. Using the bass clef and accidentals, write out 3 octaves ascending G altered scale in whole notes. Now the note names I've used is that of the altered scale. That means I'm using the flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5. So you will not see any 4th note or the 6th note in it. And the 3rd note is also there. And this is how you would write it. G, A flat, A sharp, G altered scale. I am sorry, think I thought this is a treble clef. It's my mistake. This is not written for the bass clef, it's written for the treble clef. If you take this note as a G, you'll get the G altered scale. Using the treble clef and accidentals, write 1 octave descending E flat country scale in whole notes. So E flat country scale is basically also the E flat major blues scale, and this is what it will look like. There's the chromatic movement, the flattened third note, right? The tonic, the sixth, so this is first, second flat third, third, fourth, and fifth, and the tonic. So that's how it works. Now, using the alto clef, using ascending B diminished half whole tone scale. So it starts with a half step, then a whole step. B to C is a half step, then a whole step, half step, whole step. So you will get this scale. Using the treble clef and accidentals, write 1 octave descending A flat whole tone scale. This is so all the scales have already been discussed in detail now. If you have any doubts or understanding, you can always go back and check back at what I've just shared with you, and you should be able to tackle all these questions. Okay, I'm just reading out the question. What about elements of jazz blues coordination in these modes used? There too, or both are different genres and applied music? Well, blues can use some bit of modes because it is primarily using the dominant 7th chords. Blues is all about dominant 7th chords. So there you can use some modes of the melodic minor, like the Lydian dominant, right? And the if you're using a flat 5th sharp 5, you can use the altered scale also at some places because it is a variation of a dominant 7th chord without the 5th note. So if you voice a dominant 7th without the 5th, you can at times use the altered scale. Sorry, it has just so many names: super Locrian, diminished whole tone. So anyway, you can use those scales as well, but it is not commonly used in blues. The idea of blues is actually to keep things simple. And 12 bar blues, there's a blues jazz version of it where the 12 bar progression can get very complicated. And I played a couple of songs like that. So they can get really complicated. So if you're playing jazz blues, yes, all these modes will come in very handy. But if you're playing pure blues, typically these scales will not be used so much, because the whole idea is to keep the music predictable for your audience. So no, we will not use most of these modes in just plain blues music. Using the clef provided and accidentals, write out 1 octave ascending G sharp Lydian mode. So now the trick is, now G sharp Lydian will come from which scale? Think about that. It's going to be the raised 4th note of that scale. So G sharp Lydian will come from, now this is really interesting stuff. So let's just go back for a second. What is it's a 4th degree, so we are looking at a perfect 4th or a perfect 5th above or a perfect 4th below. What is the perfect 5th above G? It's D sharp. Now D sharp scale is something that we have not really done, right? It will have 9 sharps in it. Interesting, huh? 9 sharps in it, and this is what your scale will look like. How it will have 9 sharps, and how I know that it has 9 sharps is because D sharp is an enharmonic of E flat major, and I've discussed this concept before, that the sharps and the flats of the diatonic scale, diatonic notes add up to 12. So E flat has 3 flats, and the diatonic of E flat is D sharp, and that will have 12 minus 3, 9 sharps. So it will have 9 sharps by having 2 double sharps in it, right? So that is the way that you can build the G sharp Lydian scale. Now this is a very tricky question, and they purposely put it in there because at a grade 8 you should be able to think out of the box and come up with an answer. But I have another really interesting solution for this. Here is next question is typically a very similar thing. Now they have asked for the D flat Aeolian scale. Now D flat Aeolian will come from the F flat major, which will have 8 flats. Oh boy, so that's tricky. So let's simplify it like we did with the intervals. Let's raise the tonic D flat by a semitone. What do we get? D. So if I were to construct a D Aeolian mode, it will have all the notes of the F major like this. So this is a D Aeolian mode going down, and it is using all the notes of the F major. Now D to D flat is a semitone down, and F to F flat, because the note name is the same, basically will be adding 1 flat to all of these notes, and your correct answer in the key of D flat will basically look like this. You just added all the flats. So this was the D Aeolian, and this is the D flat Aeolian. So if you apply the same logic to G sharp Lydian, Let's look at the G Lydian. G Lydian comes from D major, which has only 2 sharps. So if you're looking at G sharp, it will come from D sharp, and all the notes will be raised by a semitone. That means the F sharp and the C sharp will now become the F double sharp and the C double sharp. I hope that really helps you understand this concept. This is, I think, a very neat trick to get to a scale that you don't know very well. Use the clef provided in externals. Write out 1 octave descending A flat Dorian. Now A flat Dorian will come from the G flat major, which has 6 flats. So that's something that we have done earlier. So that's pretty simple. That's how it's done. As you can notice that I have picked out only 3 examples from the book. There are more in the book, but I purposely chose the trickier ones, so I was able to explain this concept to you. Going forward, we have a transposition where you need to transpose this music up a major second, and the second is going to be an augmented fourth. What I do simply is look at the key signature. It's 4 flats. That means we are in some key of A flat or F minor, doesn't matter. So let's take it as a major A flat, and what is major second above A flat? That's going to be B flat. That means the key signature we will use here is that of B flat, and all these notes will be moved up a note. That means if you see a note on the line, you write the note above that in the space, and wherever you see an accidental, you need to check for that accidental, that this accidental and this note, they actually make a major second interval between them. A flat to G flat is a major second, so I am fine. Another way of looking at it is that G was supposed to be natural as per the key signature, and they have put a flat. Hence, they have lowered this note by a semitone as per the key signature. To lower the A by a semitone, A is a natural as per the key signature, I will have to put a flat here. Going to the next example, we have augmented fourth. Now, augmented fourth is a tricky interval again, the tritone as we call it. So, the key that we have here is D flat major. So, what is augmented fourth above D? So, that's going to be G sharp, and the G sharp will have 6 sharps. Sorry, D flat to G is augmented. D flat to G flat will be perfect fourth. So, G is the key, and we have to write it using the alto clef. Oh, sorry, the clef is already given. So, it is the alto clef. We'll have to write it like this, and I have written the exact same notes, but an augmented fourth above. This is the D and that is the G, and hence the answer. Now, this note is an F, which is supposed to be natural as per the key signature. We have put the F flat, and this is going to be the B, and this will become a B flat as per the key signature. Lastly, we have the alto clef, and there is a musical example here. We need to transpose it up a major seventh, and what we are given is the bass clef. Now, here we will need to do a little extra bit of thinking here, because this is already a perfect fifth above the middle C. That's the G note there, and a major seventh above that is going to be the F sharp above. That's going to be too many ledger lines on the bass clef. So what I would do is I'll first think where is I will, instead of transposing it up a major seventh, I will transpose it down a minor second. Inversion of intervals. Major seventh, if you invert it, becomes minor second. So we will get the same key, same notes. It's just an octave apart. So if I bring this down a minor second, G, a minor second below G is F sharp. So that will be a key signature of F sharp major, which is 6 sharps. And this G note will become an F sharp note above the staff. But because we have a bass clef given here, I can write it even one more octave lower and then use 2 octaves below sign. So this is the logic behind this answer, that I've used the key signature F sharp major, which is major seventh above G or a minor second below G, and I have transposed this music 2 octaves down to be able to write it on the bass clef comfortably within the staff without using any ledger lines, and then I can use the 15 MA sign below to indicate that this is to be played 2 octaves lower. I am sorry again. Sorry, I was actually out this weekend and there are a couple of mistakes. This 15 should have been above the line. So this is 15 above, 15 MA above the thing. Going forward, we have the chords. Now these chords are very interesting now. We are using the 13th chords as well. And write the answer on the dotted line below. Now this is a C7 below. How I look at it is that I'll first look at what is the basic chord first. So this is my, this is my basic chord. Sorry for the drag. This is the C7 chord here and the D and the F sharp above. So D and the F sharp are the extension over the dominant 7th chord. D is the 9 and this is the sharp 11. So this is going to be a C9 sharp 11 chord. Whatever natural we have, that 9 is a natural, it's not altered, I will call it a C9, then I will put the altered extension on top, sharp 11. For example, if this was a C7 with a flat 9 and a sharp 11, I would have called it C7 flat 9 sharp 11 and not C flat 9 sharp 11, right? So the core name of the chord will come to the point including the extensions which are diatonic to the scale that we are in, right? For example, this is C7 with the 9th on the top, so it's simply a C9 chord. But if 9 was also altered like a sharp 9, we would have called it a C7 sharp 9 chord. Here we have a C7 and the 9 and the sharp 11 and 13. So I will basically call it a C13 chord, and the only altered extension in this is 11. So I will call it C13 sharp 11. This is C7 flat 5 chord. This is C7 and a flat 9. This is C7, 9 and the 11, so you can call it simply C11. And C7 and a D sharp. So that is going to be a C7 sharp 9. Now this is an interesting one. We have a C7, we have a flat 9, 11 and a flat 13. So 11 is the extension that I'll use to name the chord. It's some kind of a C11 chord with the added flat 9 and a flat 13. So that is quite a complicated name. Sometimes it is easier to name these chords as stack of chords. This is called the polychords or the slash chords naming. When we typically name a chord using the slash chord, the note after the slash is basically the bass note. So if I say C7/E, I'm playing a C7 chord with the E in the bass, right? But in this particular case, when we name it as a polychord, we can just call it the C7 chord and just look at the notes above it, right? Look at the notes above it and identify what chord that is. This is D flat, F, A flat. That is a D flat chord. So basically this is a C7 chord and a D flat chord stacked over each other. So you can call it D flat slash C7. So D flat is on the top and in the bass we have the C7 chord. So this is another way of naming this chord, and this is actually much easier to visualize on, at least on the piano. On the guitar, yes, it could be pretty difficult. If I look at another example here, this is C7 with a D major on the top. So this could also have been called a D/C7, which would have been possibly an easier name to look at than a C7 sharp 11 chord. So this is another way of naming the chords that you can look at. It's not covered in the Rockschool theory's extra concept that I've pulled out. Write out the notes of each of the following chords onto the staff below. We have a G7 flat 5 and this will look like this. So G7 is GBDF and from that chord I've lowered the 5th note. E7 sharp 9, E G sharp BD with the sharp 9 is going to be in F double sharp. F sharp would have been the E9 chord would have had the F sharp in it, because if you look at the E major scale, the 9th degree is going to be the F sharp. If you raise that by a semitone, it becomes an F double sharp. D7 sharp 11, this is basically going to have D7 is D F sharp AC and the sharp 11 is going to be the G sharp. So that's how it is. I've skipped the 5th note in it. It was whenever you're typically naming a dominant 7th, we can skip the 5th chord. And the 5th note actually can be skipped in majority of the chords. B flat 7 sharp 5 flat 9, right? So B flat 7 is B flat D F A flat, and the flat 5 is going to be the sharp 5 is going to be the F sharp, and the flat 9 is going to be C flat. So this is your chord. D flat 7 sharp 5. I'm just giving you the answers now. I've purposely not put any accidentals on the A note, because in the D flat 7 chord it would have been an A flat, and to raise it to make the sharp 5, I'm using a natural here. G sharp 7 sharp 5 sharp 9, and that is going to be quite a complicated chord. Now just before I give you that answer, let's just go to the piano and see that we have instead of having a G sharp 7 sharp 5 sharp 9, let's look at the G7 chord, right? And the sharp 5 is going to be a D sharp and the sharp 9 is going to be an A sharp, right? So that's the chord that we are looking at in the G. Now if I move all these notes up a semitone, basically what I'm going to do is G7 will become 4 sharps, right? G sharp, B sharp, D sharp and F sharp, and the 9th note is going to be an A sharp already, so that will become the A double sharp, and if I raise the 5th by a semitone, then I get a D double sharp. So this is the logic of how you can work this chord out. B7 sharp 5, the sharp 5, B7 already has an F sharp as the 5th, so it will have a double sharp on the F, and the D will be a sharp. And the A flat 7 flat 5, A flat 7 is A flat, C, E flat, G flat, and the sharp 5 is going to basically have an E natural in it. Flat 5 is going to have an E double flat because he is already a flat in this particular chord. Alright, going to the next. We are almost at the end of popular music harmony, and all we are left after that with is the band analysis section. Here we are using the 6th chord as well, and this is something that I'm going to explain in the chart of 13th chord voicings and the 6/9 chord voicing later, just a slide after this. So we have F major with the D note on the top. This is called the F6. Some people can look at it as an inversion of an A minor as well. It's the first inversion of A minor 7 as well, but it depends on the context and the music that you are in. This is, if somebody tells me play an F6, I'm basically going to play an A minor 7 with the F in the bass, or I would just voice it like the A minor 7 in the first inversion. Next we have the alto clef, and we have the B flat major 7 chord here. This is bass clef and A major 7, and the B sharp is the sharp 9, A major 7 sharp 9. Now D F A C E, so this is D F A C chord, and I can see 3 flats, so that's a D flat minor chord. So D flat minor 7, interesting chord, minor major 7 sharp 9. So let me just show you this chord, D flat minor major 7 flat 5. What is a minor major 7? This is a chord that we have not really discussed earlier. So let's look at the D major 7. It has the major 3rd and the major 7th from the root. If I lower the 3rd and the 7th by a semitone, I get the D minor 7. But how about I put the D minor chord and place a major 7th above the root on that? That's called the minor major 7 chord. So here they are asking for the D flat minor major 7 chord, which is just going to be a semitone below, D flat minor, major 7, and they have a sharp 9, which is going to be right. Interestingly, yeah, that is the chord. So minor major 7 sharp 9. You might be wondering, the sharp 9 and the minor is the same thing. So if you look at the F flat and the sharp 9 of the D flat is the E natural, these both are actually the same note. So sharp 9, they just put it just for the concept of it. Actually this is not a chord that you will typically use. It could be a D flat minor major 7 added 9 or a flat 9, but not a sharp 9, because that will be basically doubling the 3rd. We have the alto clef, and here we have FACE, and that's an F7 chord. This is the treble clef, and I can see a suspended 4th with a 7th on the top. That's a A7 sus4. This is the alto clef starting on the C sharp. This is a C sharp major 7, C sharp minor 7, sorry. And this is the bass clef starting on the F. That's a F7 sus4. Now this would have been easier to name it as a polychord, but that is not the case here, so I will just look at it as an A chord. ACEG is a A minor 7 chord, and we have the 9th, 11th and the 13th on the top, so it's A minor 13. F sharp is normally the diatonic 13th on the top, so it's not a sharp 13th here. This is a G major 7, so it's a G major 7 9 chord, G major 9 we can call it. This is E major 7, and lastly we have the F minor 7 chord. So these are the chords, and lastly we have the topic of 13th note voicing, and this is chart for it. So the notes that you see in the brackets, so it's pretty much the same rules that we discussed in grade 7 up to the 11th chords. The only thing that changes is when the 13th comes in, the 11th becomes less important. Especially in a major voicing, we don't use the, the third note anyway. I'm sorry, there's again an error here. This was supposed to be a minor and this is supposed to be a major, so I've named these two differently. This is supposed to be major and that is the minor. Anyway, so this is 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9. So that is the that's the C minor 13. That works really well, and which is also the Dorian mode. Then the major Dorian mode works really well on this. So as I discussed earlier, all of these alternate notes, first to the 5th, flat 3rd to flat 7, 5 to 9, flat 7 to 11, 9 to 13, they all make a perfect 5th interval. So this is the most consonant sounding 13th chord possible. Then we have the major 13th, and that will have the major 3rd, and the 11th will be omitted in this one because we are using the 13th. So unlike the 11th chord, where we kept the 11th and skipped the 3rd, in this particular case, because we are on a 13th chord, we will typically skip the 11th and keep the 3rd. So we have the tonality of a major 7th, which is this, and then we can skip the 9th and the 11th and we just do the 13th, or we can add the 9th. We can do that. So that works pretty well. The 5th note is typically omitted in all major, minor and dominant chords. When we come to the dominant 13th, we'll skip the 3rd and keep the 11th typically, because that just makes it for a better voicing. So this is the dominant 7th without the 5th, and the 9, 11th and the 13th. So we'll skip the 3rd. That's a better chord than doing keeping the 3rd and skipping the 11th. So typically we would keep the 11th and skip the 3rd. And 11th is also optional, so you can just basically voice it with the 1st, flat 7, 9 and the 13. That's a full dominant 13 voicing. If I use all the notes, it will sound like this. It's a very heavy texture. That's much cleaner sounding. Major 7, sharp 11, we have 1st, 3rd, 5th is to be omitted obviously, 7, 9, sharp 11. Now because we have the sharp 11, the 3rd can be kept because the interval between the 3rd and the sharp 11 is a major 9. So that doesn't clash anymore, so we can do that. 5th is skipped, and it's all the more important to skip the 5th because the sharp 11 in the 5th will make a semitone. So we will be skipping the 5th, and the major 13 sharp 11 chord will have the notes sounding like this. Right. Dominant 13 sharp 11, we can skip the 3rd and the 5th and just keep the full chord on the top. That's the dominant 7th, right? Sharp 11. So these are the typical voicings. We have the major 6, minor 6. So the 6th will be a major from the root in both these chords. So the major triad with the major 6 from the root, minor triad with the major 6 from the root. That is the major 6. 6, 9 is 1, 3, 5, 6, and the 9th is added to it. And it is typically voiced in fourths. So this is, let me just show you on the piano. So the C69 is, that's the C69. You can actually use it like that if you like, but I prefer to use it in fourths. So what I'll do is play the 6th and the 9th and use the 3rd below it. So we have a perfect 4th and a perfect 4th. So that sounds pretty nice and open compared to a very close voicing of, but it's a matter of context and choice that you can use any voicing. So those are the 13th chord voicings and the 6th and the 6-9 chords. If there's any doubt, you may please ask on the side. I'll be happy to comment on it at least. Finally, we are at the band analysis section of it. Now in this case, we are given 2 examples, and what I have not done is that I have not addressed filling up the missing parts in the score. At grade 8 level, I'm sure we have done enough in grade 6, 7 and all the grades coming up that you know how to write in that particular genre. What is more important is to understand the approach of it. So let me just talk to you briefly about this here. That when we are at a grade 8 level and going beyond it, this is almost the end of the music schooling, and now you'll be moving at a college level, the undergraduate level of content for theory and composition arranging. So pretty much all the basic concepts are covered at this point, and what we expect, what Rockschool expects you to do is now start applying this knowledge to your music. This is the same thing that we expect from you even when you're doing the diploma in performance or music teaching for that matter. It is not just about objective type learning where you are given a concept, you're given the question and the correct answer, so you have to memorize it and give the correct answer in the exam. It is not about that anymore. This is more about application of the concepts that you have learned, right? So please don't expect that you are going to find crystal clear answers to everything in the guidebook. Guidebook is like a more of a reference material. It's a support material. It is not covering end-to-end knowledge. So more you discover, more you research on the topics, more you will be able to learn from it, and more you will be able to apply. I can tell you one thing for sure, that when I was putting together this presentation, I had to get to the academic support person, John Harrison, who is also the syllabus development head in UK, to just discuss briefly what the band analysis of grade 8 is about, and why the answers are not very clearly given in the guidebook. And then he made me understand I am also coming from the classical background as well. Although my first love was rock, I was playing with bands and I got deep into classical. Then I've been always playing contemporary music all my life. But I was into this whole concept of learning concepts as they're taught in the classical theory, which are very crystal clear, and they're like, okay, this is the concept and this is how you apply it, period. There's no more application required after that. But in contemporary music, you would agree that there's a lot of improvisation and composition as compared to classical genres. Hence, this is going to be a lot more research and development on your end. So let's move to the first example. And how I have put this together is in a different way. Just a second. Sorry, I will not be able to see your comments for a bit now because I'm using the presentation on the second screen. So this is the first two bars. Just have a look at it. This is the first example, and you can see there are trumpets, tenor, saxophone, bass trombone, piano, guitar, bass, drums. So the piano, bass and drums, or the guitar as well, this kind of form the rhythm section in a jazz band, and the trumpets, horns are very common things used in a jazz arrangement. And why I'm already thinking jazz is because the time signature used here, it is 5/4. You are not likely to find many songs, any song in country music in 5/4, or many songs in any other genre, be it funk, be it blues, be it reggae. You will not find 5/4 very commonly. So that's typically a jazz thing. And next thing I put together is this chord symbol right on the top here. You can see that that's G13 sharp 11 chord. That's quite an extension. It's using the same chord over 2 bars, and you can see that these rhythms are syncopated. Again, a very jazz thing to do. So this is how it works. So this is the first 2 bars. Bars 3 and 4 going on, it goes to C9 chord, right? Sorry, I think this got taken as a snapshot. This is bar 5 and 6. The same chord comes back again. Similar arrangement going on. Drums. This part I've left blank for you to fill. I'm not filling it up for you this time. This is A flat 13 sharp 11. Now we were in the G, in the key of G major. You can see the G major key here, but suddenly we have the A flat 13 sharp 11 chord, and you can see the use of accidentals. And this is pushing the music out of the key. Again, a very typical jazz thing to do. Chromaticism goes to D flat, C7, sharp 9 flat 13 chord, B flat 9 sharp 11, F9. So all the extended chords are being used. It just ends on the A flat 13 chord. So I've left out the first 2 questions because those are improvisation sections that you were supposed to cover yourself. Write a brief analysis of the bar 1 to 4 of the piano part, naming and describing any features that have identifiable stylistic traits. You may include references to any musical devices, melodic, harmonic, rhythmic, the instrument-specific techniques that you may see in this part. So let me just go back to the bar 1 and 2, and you can see G7 sharp 13 is the chord being used here. This is using the open chord voicing, the skipping some notes, right? And bass is doubling here is doubling the bass part exactly, right? Going to the next two bars, it goes to the C9 chord. It's the same chord, sorry for this thing in the middle. This is C9 chord, and you can see that they have skipped the third note here. Sorry, third is there, the fifth note is being skipped here. C9 flat 5, it seems. No, that's a B flat, right? So that's the C9 chord, and the similar rhythms are being used. The bass is doubling again, right? So my answer to this question is going to be something like this. Piano part is using extended chords which are voiced using open chord voicing. Rhythmically, it is using syncopation, and these are typical stylistic features of jazz. You can add to it that the left hand is doubling the bass, so you can describe that as well. You can add more things that you may notice from it, but these are basically the things. State which scales would be your first choice for improvising over the first 4 bars of the score. Let's go back to the first 4 bars again. First chord is a G7 sharp 13, sharp 11 chord. G13 sharp 11, basically we are looking at a dominant with the sharp 4th. That is, if you remember the Lydian dominant scale. So the Lydian is the sharp 4th and the dominant is basically Mixolydian and the Lydian put together. So we take the flat 7th from the Mixolydian and sharp 4th from the Lydian. Put it together, we get the Mixolydian, which is also the mode of a melodic minor. So Lydian dominant is what I would use here, and this is simply a C9. So Mixolydian mode will have all the notes of this chord, so I would use that. So my answer to the question is, over the G13 sharp 11 chord bar 1 and 2, best scale choice would be G sharp Lydian dominant mode, and the C9 chord, the best choice would be the C Mixolydian mode. Multiple scale choices over changing chords is a typical feature of jazz again, right? Locate, name and describe 2 other features in the score that have significant stylistic traits. So what I have put together is the odd time signature of 5/4, which is being used, and use of out of the key chords. Locations are, it is good to mention that A flat 13 sharp 11 in bar 7, D flat 9 bar 9, A flat 7 flat 5, this is from bar 5 to 15, and in bar 15, and A flat 13 in bar 16. So these are the kind of chords that are outside the key of G major that are being used here. So these 2 are also stylistic traits of jazz. Now this is the reason why I actually got into discussion with my academic team in UK. Now this score has some elements which are, if you're open-minded about it, you will be able to easily identify it. For example, in the guidebook, they've spoken about the pop music genre, and they've taken out the typical character of pop music, that it uses diatonic chords. It mostly uses triads. It doesn't use 7th chords much, and it's a very predictable chord structure which ends in a typical cadence and all of those things. If you take those things very literally, you could be a little lost with this particular example here. Now just have a look at the example. I'm just going to go through the bars slowly. This is bar 1 and 2. You can see the instrumentation used: the bass guitar, the guitar, cello, viola, violin 1 and violin 2. So that's the string section, and there's vocals, right? Drum kit is using straight beats, tuck, 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 and the hi-hat is very simple pattern here. It's not very busy, it's not very driving like in soul music, and the guitar is playing this arpeggiated open chords, right? And the violins are playing their bit. This is bar 3 and 4. Look at the chords. We're using a slash chord, we have a dominant 7th, we have a sus, but mostly triads and simple chords. And then we are using the pizzicato technique here. Open chords carry on. We have a 7th chord coming in, C sharp 7. We have more slash chord, B slash D sharp. That's the first inversion B major. Sorry for this. I completely missed this when I was taking the snapshots. E sus 4 slash A, B7 F sharp, B. This is 7/8. So the guitar is playing similar arpeggiated chords. G sharp minor, C sharp minor, bar 9 and 10. F sharp minor 7, B7 sus 4 and B7. B7 sus 4 going to B7 is a very typical thing to be doing in pop. E sus 4 slash A. So this is pretty much moving around the same chord. Interestingly, I've called it the E sus4/A. If you look at the chord, you can actually call it the A sus2. But the reason I've called it the E sus4/A is because that puts the whole chord into the context. It is where does it resolve is the question here. So E sus4 resolves to the E chord. If I call it an A sus2, it's not going to the A major, it is resolving to the E. So for that matter, I've called it the E sus4/A and not A sus2. Interesting ending, huh? It's ending on the C sharp minor and the A. We are in the key of E major. So it uses the 6 and the 4 as the final two chords. Not very commonly done in the music that we are in, but let's just look at the questions. Analyze the underlying chord progression of the piece and briefly discuss any style of music that typically use similar chords and chord progressions. Now, looking at the B7 chord and the 7th chords of the C sharp and the F sharp, it sounds like it's not going to be a pop. But if you listen to songs like How Deep Is Your Love by Bee Gees, and there's plenty of songs, they use a lot of 7th chords actually, right? So 7th chords is actually a common thing now in pop. Even Beatles songs like Yesterday, they'll be using a lot of 7th chords there. His Beatles song like Oh Darling starts with an augmented chord. So there are chords which are just not predictable 1, 6, 4, 5 progressions in pop. So the chords used are diatonic to the key of E. All the chords that you noticed here, they all belong to the scale of E major. Most of the passage revolves around the primary chords of E, A and B, with few bars using the 2nd minor and the 6th minor 7th chords actually. The passage ends with the uncommon 4 chord, and this is typical feature of pop music. So I did find a couple of songs which end with a 4 chord in popular music. So it's not a very common thing to do because it's not really the mainstream cadence as we know it. 4th chord is a movement chord in a way, because it's always moving from the tonic to the dominant harmony and dominant to the tonic harmony. So it's got this movement thing about it. So it leaves you kind of a bit hanging. So it has a typical character of it, and it sounds perfectly fine in this particular example. Choose 3 musical terms that describe the most notable characteristics of the guitar part and name the style of music that frequently features a part such as this. So let's just look at the guitar part. So guitar part is using this arpeggiated open chords pretty much throughout the piece of music, bar 9, 10, 11, 12, and here is when the single chords are coming in, and then there's little arpeggiation at the end and ends. So the first feature I notice is the arpeggiated chords. Guitar is playing broken chords and arpeggios for most part of the passage. The second feature I noticed is the voice leading. So let's just look at how it is moving from the chord of E major to A major. So E has a G sharp note in it, and G goes to the A, the B goes to the C. These are the concepts of voice leading. So it's very smoothly changing from one chord to the other. Similarly, it comes back to the E and goes back to the A. It's using this pretty much, and especially when it's moving from the F sharp to the B7. Look at that. The notes are pretty much the same, but this is a B7 chord, this is a B7/F sharp. Where was that? This one. So this is a F sharp -7, and this is the same notes, but this is a B7 sus4 chord, which goes to the B7. And look at the voice leading, how the top note rises by a tone, bottom note is falling by 2 tones, and the middle notes are kept the same. So that kind of beautiful voicing is using voice leading. So the second feature is the voice leading. Guitar arrangement is smoothly voice leading from one chord to the other. And lastly, it's the open chord voicing. Bar 12 to 15 use open chord voicings from the guitar, where the guitar plays skipping a couple of notes and making beautiful voicing out of those chords. All of these features are typical to the pop music. So the style of music that these features belong to is pop. Suggest 2 more instruments that could be added to the arrangement and briefly discuss the reasons for your choices. Well, you can't really give a reason like, I would like to use an organ because it has this F sharp -7 chord and it sounds beautiful on the organ. That's not a valid reason. You have to just look at what genre of music we are in and what is the kind of instrumentation that typically works with it. Just a second, please. So my choice of instruments, and yours could be different, is the electric piano, EP sound. This is common in pop music and will complement the flowing texture of the string section. And backing vocals, pop music often has backing vocals which complements the lead vocals. They're typically with harmonies, so you can add that if you prefer to add an organ to it, or if you prefer to add percussions to it, which is also a done thing. If you look at a song like Hotel California, percussion is such a prominent part of it. So or if you're looking at Santana, it's not exactly jazz, it's not blues, it's like pop blues kind of a genre. So you can use those kind of instrumentations if you like. So it is totally up to you and what you conceive to be the typical feature of this particular music. There is no one correct answer for these questions, and that's what I mean by application. So with that, we come to the end of the final webinar. My wife will be very happy to know that finally we are finishing this webinar. Thank you so much for being online, and please do hit the like. Let me just have a look at the, yeah, so there are no more comments or questions. So please do hit the likes and subscribe to our channel for all the upcoming content that we will be bringing to you. This is end of this series. That doesn't mean that we will not do any further webinars. Let's see what we come up with next. But first thing first, High Achievers Concert is coming up on this platform. It will be streamed live. And if there's any feedback, comments, or yeah, we will be very happy to receive it on the mail from you. You already have a mail from my email ID. Please do write back of how you felt about these webinars, and I hope you really enjoyed as much as we enjoyed putting this together for you. Thank you so much, and see you online soon. Take care. Bye.